Hey geeks, welcome to another episode of Rockin The Code World with dotNetDave. I'm David McCarter, and I hope you're having a great day, and I hope you had a great week. I'm kind of glad the week is over. It was a tough week, but it seems like where I live in San Diego, California, we skipped spring and went directly into summer. You know, all this week it's been in the 80s here and 80 degrees Fahrenheit here in San Diego. So so no spring this year, which I'm kind of glad about. Maybe this shows things are starting to get better here, but we'll see. Fingers crossed. Anyway, welcome to today's show. My guest today is Allen ONeill. Allen is the CTO at DataWorks, and he's also a friend of mine and a fellow speaker who I get to hang out with every time I'm in India speaking at C-SharpCorner conference. Though I haven't been able to do that in 2 years now. So I'm really bummed out that I haven't been able to see Allen. He's one of my favorite people to hang around with when I go to conferences because, speaking with Allen is always a fun thing. Maybe because he's from Ireland, I don't know. I'm part Irish. Maybe there's something going on there. But he's a great guy, and if you are a regular to C-SharpCorner, then you probably already know him because he does shows on here too, just like I do. So, and also this is the 20th episode of Rockin The Code World. Made it to 20 without forgetting to wake up early enough to do the show, so I'm happy about that. But yeah, 20th show. It's pretty cool. I'm kind of was looking, when I was making the slides today, I was thinking, what are we going to do for the 100th show? We'll see. So anyway, let's get going. We have lots to talk about, and I want to give, most of the time to Allen, of course, because he's my special guest today. Speaking about conferences, this year is for those about to code worldwide tour of dotNetDave, and I'm really looking forward to getting out and speaking. But so far, no one's requested me. So if you want me to speak, please go there. If you want me to speak in your area, please send your local conference organizers to that URL so they can come speak. I'll be able to speak anywhere in the world at the end of this month. And so I want to speak again, please, please, please. And I especially want to go overseas because it seems like, at least what I've been reading about the American conferences so far, is they're really being cheap and not even paying for speakers' travel and not even paying a speaker fee. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but I kind of enjoy conferences not in America better anyway. So anyway, I hope someone requests me because so far I have nothing planned. So, I've been promoting my new open source project called Spargene. If you go to spargene.net, you can learn all about it. It's my open source project, all in .NET 5. It's only for .NET 5 and above. The older .NET Core open source project is still up there, but I'm really not going to do much work on that anymore because I'm focused all on .NET 5 and .NET 6. And so I'm actually last night and this morning, I was running benchmarks for the next release. I've been working really hard on the next release, and I've added a lot of code already for the next release. So I'm looking forward to that. Also, if you didn't know, in January, I released the 7th edition of my coding standards book. Here's my proof copy right here. And there it is. There's my proof copy. It's the biggest book I've ever released on my own. It's over 300 pages, over 130 new pages, I think, of coding standards and all kinds of other things to help you in creating good quality code that you can actually understand 6 months from now. And you younger developers out there, you will appreciate this when you get older, when you're an older developer, because I'm really appreciative of people who do good coding standards, like my guest last week, Rocky, because when you get older, it's better to have things documented and look the same and everything. So anyway, I hope you'll pick up a copy. And there's also the edition for .NET Core still out there too. I'll leave that up as long as people are using .NET Core. Okay. So I have a new C# article this week. It's called Testing Software Engineers During an Interview. There is a better way. And the reason I wrote this article, part of the article is actually from my technical interview book, but I added a lot more text to it to tell a story of basically, because, well, let me back up a little bit. So right now, my contract where I'm working ends at the end of next month. So I've been looking for a new job and, looking at job postings and looking at what people are saying on Twitter. And I've seen a big thing about the tests that are given to software engineers. And I agree, a lot of them don't make sense and seem kind of silly to me. And so since I'm now back in the job market and I'm doing interviews, I'm really not looking forward to the test part. Not only because I don't like being tested for some reason, I think that comes from my being a kid in school, but I just don't think the tests they give you are very good. And I even give you some examples of those not very good tests in the article. And then I tell you about how I was able to successfully interview people at a company when we were having trouble interviewing people at a company. And the method I came up with was so successful. Everybody, since we came up with that method, I think we hired or pretty close to everybody. It really solved the problem we were, the bottleneck we were having at the company trying to hire beginners because we had too many features and not enough programmers. And so the company I was working at made the classic mistake of let's just hire more people. That'll fix it. Yeah, that doesn't work. But anyway, I hope you check the article out. And I'm already writing the next one. So look forward to that in a couple weeks. So the giveaway today, just like every week, is Code Rush from DevExpress. You can go to devexpress.com/dotNetDave and download your free real copy of Code Rush. It's the only code refactoring tool I've ever used in Visual Studio since Visual Studio has been around. And it really, really helps me to be a productive developer. And it helps me learn better practices and patterns too. So I hope you'll download a copy. It's free. Why not? If you're using the refactoring tools built into Visual Studio, while they're okay, it's nothing compared to what you can get with Code Rush from DevExpress. So pick up your copy now. It's free. You have no excuses. I've been trying to come up with funny ways of telling real stories that happens that I know firsthand or secondhand. And this is actually a story that happened firsthand a couple weeks ago to me. It's about microservices. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about it today, since Allen is our guest today and he's all about the cloud and the cloud is all about microservices. I thought I'd share this. So I did this with the South Park cartoon creator on the web. After I made the cartoons, I realized that some people in other countries don't know what South Park is. If you haven't watched South Park, you have to. It's super, super funny if you can get hold of the copies of it. And they actually have some really funny episodes about computers and tech and things like that. So anyway, I made this, and this really happened. And I couldn't believe my ears. But it seems like some people where I work need some training on what a microservice is. So maybe we can talk about that in the show today. So manager comes up to developer and says, "What's the IP address for your server your microservice runs on?" because they were trying to figure out the security, right? The developers' answer was, it's freaking serverless. There isn't a server or IP address I can give you. Well, that's not exactly what the developer said, but I tried to make it a little bit funny, and that's why the character is holding a glass of wine, because after hearing comments like that, it's time to drink a glass of wine. So anyway, if you found it funny, please let me know by making a comment in the chat. And also, before I forget, because I usually do, if you have any questions for Allen, and I hope you do, because he's the cloud expert around here, please put them in the comments. There's a little bit of lag in the comments, so make sure you do it now so we can get all those comments and questions answered during the show. Speaking of Allen, I've known Allen for a while now. He'll have to refresh my memory, but I think he's been at every C-SharpCorner conference I've been at. And I really like hanging around with Allen. He's a great guy and always interesting to talk to. And so here's some pictures I found this morning of the last time we were together in India 2 years ago. And here's us at the panel that I think we were there to do at the very beginning of the conference for speakers. Here's us answering questions during a panel. During the conference, there's Allen answering a question. There's three of it. There's the three of us, Allen, me, and my good friend Magnus, listening to a question, it looks like. And here's us laughing and me doing a face plant or something. I don't know what was happening at that moment. I kind of called it the Three Stooges moment. And if you haven't watched the Three Stooges, it's a really old show, comedy slapstick show that used to be on long time ago. I used to watch it all the time when I was a kid. Anyway, so now I would like to invite Allen onto the show. Allen is an engineer, CTO, and tech community advocate, and has the shortest bio so far. So thank you for that, Allen. How's it going?
I'm doing well.
You have you're all COVID up, huh?
I'm all COVID up, and I'm wearing this mask for a reason, because I'll take it off now. Because it's interesting, in such a short time, it's become the new norm, right?
Yeah.
So it's the new norm for us to wear masks. And somebody comes on a show, you see them on a photograph, you see them on the TV, you see them on the street, they come into your house, whatever, and they're wearing a mask. Yeah. And you don't even question it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if that was, let's say, 2 years ago, you'd say, geez, it's a stick up.
Yeah, it's a criminal.
Okay, right? It's like people on the outside of shops that would say, couriers, take off your helmets. No face masks, no bandanas. And now it says, do not come in unless you're wearing a face mask and a bandana. So it's the new norm, right? Yeah. And it struck me, and I only actually reached out and picked it up while you were giving your intro there, because it struck me as really interesting over a couple of things. Number one, microservices, cloud, it's the new norm, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the other thing was, as you're talking about your books, you're talking about, I heard about you first in relation to code quality, right? Mm-hmm. And, I don't give a damn about interviews or anything else, because I'm only interested in quality. It's either data quality or code quality. That's all I want to know about. And, Dave was the go-to guy for .NET code quality. Mm-hmm. A lot of times people think about code quality and, associated, unit tests and regression tests and black box and smoke testing and yada, yada, yada. And, oh God, it's such a pain and I don't want to do it. It's like a barrier and everything else. And it's like this huge big hurdle to get there, right?
Right.
But then you go through the pain of doing it, and then guess what? It becomes the new normal.
Mm-hmm. It becomes easier once you do it. Yeah.
And this is the thing. It's the same as this pandemic. When you realize you got to do something, you do it, and then you realize it's better for everybody. If I wear my mask, well then I'm ensuring that I'm slowing down, spread of disease towards me.
Mhm.
I'm slowing
Right.
down spread of any disease I might have to give to somebody else. Hopefully I'm saving somebody else's life, or if not their life, I'm saving the life of their mother, their father, their kid, their uncle,
Right.
whatever. And in the same way, not to be trite, but in the same way, when I go out there and I write clean code, when I architect something for microservices of the cloud rather than something that's monolithic that we would have in the old days, I'm helping everybody else out there as well, because I'm helping them to maintain something that is built in a much better way, and it's much more sustainable in many, many different ways. So I think that there's a lot of correlation and links between the new norm that we're in now and stuff that you've been talking about for years, Dave.
Yeah, it's so how is the pandemic going in your country?
At the moment, we're very heavily locked down. We have our first couple of arrests of people at the airport who are meant to go into mandatory quarantine, into quarantine hotels, and they've decided, no, we're better than that. We're not the same as you plebs, so why should we have to do that? And so, they're kicking up a fuss and they're getting arrested and they're being put into jail and all sorts. But, at the end of the day, it's one of those rules that it's like, I say to the young guys when they're out driving their cars, I know you're going to drive your car safely. I'm not concerned about you. What I'm concerned about is the guy coming around the corner who's had a couple of beers. He doesn't give a shit about you or your mom or your family or your girlfriend or anything else. And you don't see him coming.
Right.
So it's not you you've got to take care of. You've got to take care of what the other guy is doing, what the other girl is doing, the other person is doing. And this is why it's so important to work together as a community, certainly for this pandemic stuff. But then if you overlay that into general life, it's why it's so important to make sure that we always look out for community, be it our local community, people that we want to help out, or be it our brothers and sisters in tech and our tech community, and it doesn't really matter whether it's somebody that's over in San Diego like you are, or out in halfway up a mountain in Ireland with the leprechauns like I am, or whether it's somebody down in Timbuktu. It's irrelevant. Everybody is community, and that's how the world goes around. So it's most important, I think, in all things to think community.
Yeah, it's so so are the people in your country as big as idiots as Americans? Because the Americans, at least half it seemed to be really stupid about this stuff, and half seem to be smart about it, and that's not going to work. And so
I don't think it's half. I think across the world it's just proportional. You may have more idiots, but that's only because you got proportionally more people. We still have the same amount of idiots. You get the same amount of idiots no matter where you go. The unfortunate thing, and I'm not going to get into a debate about this. We'll have it over a few beers down in Delhi next time, right? The unfortunate thing is that a lot of science, there seems to be a movement that was kind of around over the last couple of years when that idiot orange head was in charge in the state.
The toddler in chief.
The toddler in chief, exactly. And there's kind of a movement that was against science and against logical thinking. It was very heavy, and that's really sad to see. And that kind of bled over into the pandemic and stuff. So yeah, we are seeing some idiots. There was a girl the other day who decided to breach some local law, whatever it was, and then she got in her car and she started to drive at speed, and then the cops started chasing her, and then there was helicopters chasing her, and it was on all over the news and everything else. And then guess what she did? She went to the airport, and she went on a holiday, which she wasn't meant to do, but she said she was going for medical reasons. Now, all she did was she phoned someplace in Spain or wherever, and she said, hey, can you book me a dental cleaning appointment, please? And then she got to the airport, and she said, "I've got a medical emergency appointment I've got to go to." And they said, "Oh, okay, sorry, off you go. No, sorry to hear that. Hope you're okay." And then she lands on the other side, and 10 hours later, she starts on social media posting photos of herself out at the beach and at the party, and then she started posting pictures and videos of her live chase as she was getting chased by cops and helicopters and everything else. So
she thought that was cool, huh?
She thought it was cool. You know what? She landed and she's screwed because she's in the clink right now in the monkey house. So yeah. So there's crazies everywhere, Dave.
Yeah, I know. It's I almost got into a couple blocks away from me, there's a little strip mall. That's where I go donate blood, and that's where I always get sushi right after I donate blood. That's my little reward. And I almost got in a fist fight with a guy last year because I asked him to put his mask on, which he had in his hand, and I was dumbfounded going, it's in your hand. I mean, what is the problem here? What
annoys me almost more is the people who go around and they use it just as a chin strap.
Oh yeah. Or under the nose. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of them now, in fairness, you can look at and go, my God, you have a seriously big Pinocchio going on. you poor person. I'm sorry, we don't have a mask that big. I give you mine. You can join the two together, but you still got to wear the damn thing, Yeah. Well, so, hey, let's go and talk some tech and shit.
Yeah. I was going to say, we got to move on. But the one thing I do want to say that I don't like about the mask is that I can't see people's expressions. Oh
no, of course you can. You go off and you get all those. Do you remember? You will, because you were kind of the same vintage as me, right? You got a gray beard too. Despite the fact that I hate you because you actually have hair, let alone gray hair, right? So in any case, yeah. I remember back in the 80s and 90s, maybe it was more the 80s. There was this jeans company, and they came out with these sexy jeans, and in the back pockets, the back pockets were actually clear and open. So as somebody walked along, it was like Perspex or something, plastic, see-through. So as somebody walked along, you could see in their fine bottom as they walked along the street, and that was really cool. But I've seen masks recently that actually have this Perspex in the center. So you can see their smile, you can see their face, and that kind of stuff. So
I've seen those too. Yeah. So let's move on to tech now that we've talked a lot about COVID. Hopefully this time next year we won't be talking about COVID. So I don't know why Mahesh asked when's the next C-SharpCorner conference, because it's his conference. So you tell us, Mahesh.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hopefully next year.
I'm going to assume that we're hopefully looking, maybe the way the world is looking and the way things are going. It's not just about whether the guys who and the girls who travel to the conference from abroad, but the C-Sharp conference has been traditionally in Delhi and other places in Asia, and so it's not just about us going there, it's also about the local people and how safe they are. And I do know that we've not seen the rollout of the vaccine in those areas. So hopefully next year we'll see a big turn and we can get back to some kind of normal. But the interesting thing of COVID is that it's changed so many things in tech, and it really has brought a new spotlight on cloud. And all of the services around cloud and the things that we can do. Many companies for such a long time said, it's impossible for us to work unless everybody's in the one place. Well, guess what? Are you out of business? No. Have your sales gone down dramatically because your people are not sitting around an office, wasting their time with all this commute and everything? No. Well, then guess what? You don't have a problem. Just keep doing what you're doing and get rid of your expensive office space in the center of town and pay your staff better, right? Yeah. So, but that's the good thing. We've seen so many services that have moved to the cloud from necessity. We've seen the benefit of all of the homeworking that people have been able to do. We've seen the improvement in people's lives because they have been able to use this technology, and that's what it's about. It's about the cloud technology, to continue working and to continue providing for their families, and keeping things going. Now, of course, those of us who do work in tech and all of the surrounding things, and who are able to continue working from home, we're incredibly privileged. We really are.
Yes.
I am concerned about those people who can't, and those people who must, be physically in a place, etc., etc. And that's, I'm just incredibly grateful that I'm not there, because I'd be probably dead because I have one of those underlying conditions, and I'd be, not able to keep myself safe.
Me too.
Yeah. So, from a cloud point of view, it's been a wonderful time. Certainly from an e-commerce point of view, the data that runs on the cloud, all of the infrastructure, the logistics people, the couriers, the transport, the communications. It's been an absolutely boom time for them, and operating on the cloud over the past 18 months or so. And even there, a statistic I read lately showed that on the e-commerce side of things, projections that had been made that we wouldn't hit for 5 years were actually hit in the first 7 months of 2020.
Yeah.
So, the adoption of cloud, the progression of cloud, the build out of cloud has absolutely incredibly accelerated. And I think we're only going to see more and more and more use of it as the next, months and years go forward. So it really is important that everybody in our community gets more aware of all of the opportunities for cloud, and the opportunities that are critical out there, I think, for folk to upskill, because there's a lot of people that maybe they're IT pros who previously were used to working on physical servers and managing the Dynamics or the 365 or the Exchange box or whatever. And hey, now we don't need that anymore, right? It's up in the cloud. So what do those folks do, and how do we retrain them to make sure that they're still active and important? Because when we look at the cloud and we look at automation and we consider the underlying things that are driven by AI and machine learning, the most important thing from my point of view is not to say, and I do this very much in a business level, where I'm speaking to C-suite leaders and stuff in large enterprise, and I say to them, when you're thinking about cloud and you're thinking about how can I automate this thing and how can I make intelligence built into this thing, etc., don't think about doing away with people. Okay, that's not what you should be thinking.
Right.
What you want to think about is, how can I use this thing, this cloud thing, and this AI thing to augment my people, to augment what they do, to take those repetitive tasks away from them, and to use those people for more intelligent and useful things that only humans can do.
Right.
That's the critical part, is to augment the human, not to replace the human.
Right.
Because there's so many, cloud is awesome, AI is fantastic, but there's so many things that the cloud can't do and AI can't do. So the real trick here is to be able to separate those two out and ensure that we augment and support the human, not replace them.
Yeah, there's at least in America, I don't know about in your country or where else in the world too much, but at least in America, we have a shortage of developers. And so, we need more developers. So don't get rid of them, retrain them, to maybe do something else that they'll be better. I mean, they can do that'll be, help with the bottom line. Right.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you say that we need developers, I'd question that, and I would say, well, do we need developers, or actually do we need to upskill the people that we have to become more technically literate? Because we don't necessarily need developers to do an awful lot of what we have.
Right.
For example, if we look at the big push that's been on in the low code, no code area for a number of years, in particular, if I look to the Microsoft Power Base, so we have PowerFlow, Power BI, Power Apps, there's some incredible stories of how people who wouldn't see themselves as technical, or who you and I might, in our kind of transcendent, incredibly highly technical state might look at and go, wow, they know nothing. But yet they're the people that are looked up to in the office because they are the technical folk, right? They know that smidgen that nobody else knows, right? And they're the heroes that keep all the glue going together. When guys like you and me are, running ahead doing our bizarre AI stuff and cloud scaling at global scale and everything else. But yet, if we go along to these guys and say, we don't want to train you to be a developer. What we want to do is we want to give you new skills with this low code, no code stuff to enable you to see a problem in the organization and then to link together those parts of the organization to connect and pull a bit of data over here to draw an app. Because what does it take, right? What does it take to actually build a web app or to build an app for your phone? Do you really have to go and get Android Studio and start writing it, and all that bullshit? You don't, right?
No,
do you really need to go off and understand HTML and CSS to be able to write a web page? You don't.
Not anymore.
Do you really need it? You don't, right? So I disagree with the thing that we need, another 25 million developers. We don't. What we need to do is we need to upskill the people that we do have
to solve those problems
interested in the areas, because the critical part is not the technical knowledge. The critical part is the domain knowledge. If you have the domain and the business knowledge, well, then you and then you give them some, low code, no code type tools where you can say, look, you currently, and I'm looking around my desk here and I don't even have it. But look, you currently have, let's say, a piece of paper, and this is a form that you fill in every single day whenever something is delivered, or whenever you go and order some new replenishment stock for your stationery or whatever it happens to be. And you do this normally by hand, or you jot it down, or you put it on the whiteboard, or it goes in your fridge, or whatever happens, right? If I give you a tool instead that you can literally go and you can go click, add a button, click, add a field. That field is called reorder. That button does an action. Action is send email. Send email to who? Pick from a list, to the replenishment officer, or procurement, or whatever it happens to be, right? Those technologies are there right now. It's not rocket science. They exist. And in actual fact, while some people would look at them and say, oh, they're expensive, it's like, 50 quid or $50 or $25 a month for a user or something. And, that adds up, and that could be like $2.5 grand a month or a year for our small team. And that's a lot of money. Yeah, but guess what? If you actually had to go out and get a full-time qualified developer to put all this stuff together, you would not see any change out of probably 150 or 200 grand. So that $2.5 grand pales into existence, right? And number two, that developer wouldn't understand your business. The people inside your business understand your business. You need to, guess what? Augment these people and allow them to lift you up into the cloud, right? And I think this is one of the biggest tricks that's being missed right now worldwide, is using the people that you have in no code, and then having, guys who have and girls who have more experience, let's say, of putting the big back ends together and helping you do that. But for most of the stuff, most of the work, you do not need us, right? And in fact, one of the things that I used to frequently tell people, and I still tell people, they say, what do you do every day? And I say, well, actually, my number one goal every day is to engineer myself out of a job. That's my number one goal, right? Because if I can do that, it means that I am automating the stuff I don't want to do, or I'm delegating it to somebody, and then they get bored and they can automate it or delegate to somebody, and thus over time, our business and our systems just get more efficient, So cloud is there. Cloud is awesome. AI is awesome. But we don't need more developers. We just need to retrain the people that we have and give them extra tools. Imagine where we would be now if we didn't have the horrific constraints that was put on society in the dark ages, right? Or for all those hundreds of years, we weren't allowed progress because it was against somebody's rules, right? And then suddenly we have the age of enlightenment and everything comes forward, and we suddenly see all of those hundreds of years where we were kept back and they were rolled forward. And imagine we didn't have places where somebody forbade dancing because it was against somebody's religion or somebody's ideology.
I'm sure that's happened.
So it still happens daily around the world.
Yeah,
And I'm just thinking, imagine we didn't have those restrictions and people didn't say, oh, you can't do that because you're not a developer. You can't do that because you're not an engineer. You can't do that because you haven't got a PhD. You can't do that because you're not a manager, right? That's all bullshit, right?
Yeah, of course.
The bottom line is that everybody can do anything. The cloud is there and we can use it, and we don't need to have PhDs to use it. This is not rocket science, okay?
Yeah.
The most important thing is your people. So use your people and use your people and use your people and retrain them, And if anybody has any kind of inkling towards anything technical, they can do this. I mean, if you can get my dear old mum when she was alive, she could send a text. Like if we could teach my dear old mum to use a mobile phone, even though half the time the text messages she sent me were blank. We can teach anybody. Now, I actually
picture of the ceiling.
I think that when she sent me those blank text messages, she was actually being sneaky, and she knew damn well that I'd ring her up and say, "Hey, you're sending me blank text messages." Oh, good idea. It's nice to have you to talk to on the phone anyway.
Their passive aggressive way of getting to talk to you, I guess. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But go ahead.
So go on. Yeah.
But this whole thing with the the low code thing, has been big on my mind since like the mid 2000s, really. And while you were talking, I was trying to think of all the different platforms Microsoft has come out with and don't exist anymore to kind of help with that. And the first one I thought of actually was when I was in charge of a software development worldwide at a biotech company. I was really pushing Microsoft Forms because, I wanted to get out of the business of writing reports, right? Because it would take so long for us to get time to do a report. And then, someone in marketing or sales would get upset. And then if they had to tweak it, they had to come back to us. And I'm going, okay, this is ridiculous. And so I pushed really hard to get Microsoft Forms into that company, and I did. And then, we had, other things like even, Light Switch, that I thought could be a good low code solution for building sites. Even before Light Switch, we had the data services and the dynamic data website. Remember that? I don't know if you remember that way back when. That again was just pointing a framework to a data model and you got a website, right? But that's gone, unfortunately, too. So now Microsoft has Power Apps and Power Apps, like you were saying, is in the cloud. And so, yeah, I actually thought this day would have been here a long time ago, right? I thought by now we would already be doing more of this, but I'm glad it's happening, right? And
yeah.
And it's so, the people, like you were talking about, the people like people in marketing and sales and stuff, if you can teach them how to use something like Power Apps with no code, right, then they can go off and do whatever they want and stop bugging us about little things so we can handle the bigger things, right? And it's
not even about bugging us, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to empower people and to empower them to spend their time better. They don't want to bug us. Right. They really don't. Do you really think that, the marketing manager gets up in the morning and she thinks, you know what, I'm going over there and I'm just going to annoy the head off Dave Arthur because
they might.
I want this damn report and I'm just going to sit on his ass until he gives it to me, right? He doesn't get up out of bed thinking about that. She gets up out of bed thinking, how can I get better penetration into my A/B market in lower Chicago? How can I get better statistics on this, that, and the other? Oh God, I'm going to have to go and ask those programmer guys. It would be so much better for her if she could just go, bang, I get it myself, right?
Right.
So it's the old thing of give somebody a fish or teach them how to fish, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
What's one of the biggest and fastest growing companies in the world at the moment? Uipath, robotic process automation. And we see RPA in it's something that Simon knows quite a bit about, actually. And we see RPA in some of the Microsoft tools as well. But it's the same thing. It's allowing people to say, there's processes that we used to do manually. There's different screens and different systems. And this RPA thing allows us to point and click and get data from that system there, and point and click and paste it into that spreadsheet there, and then dynamic or automatically point and click and press save, and then press send, and then do this, and then have another one over there, do X, Y, and Z. And all they're doing is the same thing. It's just low code, no code.
Yeah.
Right. I actually remember back in about 2002, 2003, using what was back then known, and you will remember them, as a macro tool.
Macros.
And I used a macro tool as like Power Macro or something. And I used this macro tool to open a particular application, to go to it, to copy and paste information from screens, and to eventually go through the entire application and dump all this information out into a spreadsheet, which was then used to get analyzed and da-da-da-da. Now, I was brought in at that time to look at reverse engineering this application, which they had purchased like 10 years previously, and the company had gone bust, and the data was in a format that it was proprietary and they couldn't get at it, and they wanted to bring it into a new system and da-da-da-da. And they had kind of resigned themselves to the fact that it was going to cost at the time, $70,000 or $80,000 equivalent back in 2002, which is a huge amount of money now, let alone then, to basically have this database reverse engineered, because it was kind of a roll your own database written in binary is the only way to see it. And it was to be reverse engineered, and it was going to be a horrendously expensive and complex thing to do. And they'd got all these quotes, and then a friend of mine said, you always look at things in an abstract way. You always come up with quirky solutions, and you're able to solve these intractable problems. Can you just go into those guys and just give them a bit of advice and just tell them if they're going down the right way? And I had a little look, and I said, guys, you don't need to do that. In fact, if you buy a license for this product here for $125, I will teach Mary here, sitting beside me, how to use this tool, and how to set up macros that she'll have done in 3 or 4 days, and you'll have all your data out for 3 days of Mary's time, and $125 of a license versus 70,000, and plus you can give me a nice bottle of wine for coming down as well, right? And we did that, and that's what it was. And guess what? That was robotic process automation. So technology's been there for so long. Yeah.
Well, that kind of reminds me of the struggle I've had pretty much my entire career, trying to get companies to understand it's cheaper to buy a third-party product component than to build it yourself, right? And unless you work for a UI company, you shouldn't be developing controls, right? And things like that for web pages and WinForms or UWP or whatever, right? We shouldn't be building those, right? We use them so we can quickly add data and show it and pivot it around and things like that. But if you just spend, even if you talk about something like DevExpress, and let's say the entire DevExpress suite costs, maybe $1,200 for a developer for a year, right? And they go, oh, well, that's too expensive. And well, then you want a developer to take, 100 times that to do the same work, right? And less quality in the end, right? And less features in the end, right? Why don't you just buy this, right? And I haven't found the magic words to say to a company in my 27 years to get them to get on board. It's always been a struggle with me, and I've never understood it. And I just don't think they don't see the cost besides what's on the spreadsheet, right?
3 little letters, ROI. Non-investment, baby.
Right. Yeah, I know.
I think a lot of the time, what you're looking at there is you're looking at budgets, but you're probably more looking at not having the right decision maker, understanding your message. Because I think that a lot of times when somebody goes in maybe as a hired hand, they go in just to be a freelance programmer, developer, whatever, they're in at one particular level, and they're only expected to operate at that level.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go along and you're going in to do something else, maybe in the C-suite, and then you're not talking, code to them. You're talking budgets, and you're talking ROI, and you're talking long-term strategy and investment, et cetera.
Right.
So at that level, it makes sense and they understand it. But when you go a little bit too far down the food chain, the problem, I think, is that folk there say, well, I've only got a budget for this, and I'm not going to rock the boat by asking for anything else. And, you're wiping out my budget with your hourly rate. So, be quiet and build me that component.
So, I can't believe we're almost out of time. So let's actually do a question, because I asked people to do questions, and it seems like Simon's been paying attention, because he's sure been putting a lot of comments on. But no, not that one, Simon. Let's do. What are the challenges you face while working microservice architecture?
Okay, very simply. The biggest challenge you will have with the microservices architecture is being sensible. Okay, because some people say microservices, it's almost like a religion, and they will say, every little tiny thing has to have its own microservice. Well, the thing is that if you do that, you will end up with millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of these little microservices that are almost impossible to keep a handle on, and it can incredibly quickly go out of control. What I like to do instead is I like to take a sensible approach, and I use a microservice architecture, but I call it a sensible service architecture, right? So looking at what your entire system does holistically is incredibly important. And you need to look not only at what it's doing now, but always ask yourself, what would happen if I had to put 10x, 100x, 1000x the pressure on that particular point in the system, right? And if you say, well, this particular thing here, it's only doing some basic CRUD, so it's no big pressure. Yeah, but what about if this system you had, which is maybe an e-commerce thing, suddenly Kim Kardashian or Kanye West or somebody or the toddler in chief, Orange Head, mentioned it on social media, and then suddenly it got a burst of like 100,000 requests a second. How would it handle the database then, right? And it does happen. So, very simple things to say are, okay, well, what we're going to do is, instead of simply going straight to the database, we're going to have a little service in front of that actually puts all the messages or all of the things into a queue.
Right.
And then that queue goes into the database. So, it's about making pragmatic and sensible decisions. It's not about getting sucked into the religion that every single thing has to have an API. It doesn't, Sometimes the best thing to do is not an API. Sometimes the best thing to do is to say, no, we're not going to write yet again another API for this. Actually, we're just going to bundle that into the payload of a message, and we're going to let it get handled downstream someplace else. Okay.
Yeah.
So don't fool yourself into thinking that microservices is the right answer, because they're not always the right answer.
No.
The right answer is whatever works for the architecture that you're trying to design at that time. And one size does not fit all. And serverless, unlike what some people will tell you, also does not fit all the time. Right?
Sure.
You absolutely have to pick what's going to go where. And yes, sometimes for small things, serverless makes sense. Sometimes for incredibly big things, serverless makes sense, but not for all of the things all of the time.
Right.
The answer to that question, and to pretty much every question I've ever had in my career in technology, the answer is always, it depends.
Right. Exactly. Yes, that's so true. And, I worked, I've already architected a couple microservice solutions where I work, and I'm just about this week I started writing the shell for it, and then now I'm writing the actual microservice, and so I'm teaching the company for the first time about microservices and getting on board with that kind of way of doing things. But my successful microservice at a company up the highway from me was, when I got at the company, they were processing 600K payloads of data from a cell phone. It took their backend process, because we had this on a screen all the time, where we worked, and it was averaging 7 to 70 seconds just to process 600K of data, right? Which is horribly, horribly slow, right?
This is not 600K messages, it's 600 kilobytes of data, right?
Right. Yes. 600 kilobytes. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so when I left, we were in testing, and I got that down to under 300 milliseconds. And that's without changing all the other crappy processing that they had on the back end.
Dave, you should be ashamed of yourself. 300 milliseconds, really.
I know.
That's like half a millisecond per kilobyte. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah, but all I did was use queues and microservices, and I solved their problem, and they were able to bring on bigger contracts, because of that, because they were, the reason they hired me was because they couldn't bring on big contracts because this performance was way too bad for the people, the prospective customers, right? Yeah. And so I was able to get that down. So yes, microservices can really solve things, but in the same vein, even when I was working on microservices early on, I can see the dangers with microservices too, right? And I'm already seeing people doing it, which I predicted would happen. So my advice, at least for microservices, is don't forget the other things you've learned in your career, like reusability and making things testable and all these other things, right? You just don't throw out because you're doing a microservice and you think that, that code will only be in that microservice. You're wrong, right? It might have to be used somewhere else someday. So just write it like that in the first place. And then of course unit testing and all those other kind of things. But anyway, we have another question I thought was interesting. So what's the difference between monolithic SOA and microservice architecture?
Goodness. Okay.
I know that's a big one for 4 minutes left, but
no, it's okay. Monolithic is putting everything to do with your solution completely into one application. So it's like the old days where we would have one exe. Right. And that was it. One executable file. And it could be, if it was an old school C++ thing, you might have it in, 2 or 3, 20, 30 kilobytes if it was a small app. Right. If it was a massive app, it could have been hundreds of megabytes in size because it could have all sorts of embedded resources and everything else. And you had to have one big, huge mother XXX of a system to run that monolithic architecture, right?
Right.
Secondly, a service-orientated architecture is not far from a microservice architecture. Okay, service orientated and microservice, they try to do the same thing, in that they say, we do not want these things to be tightly coupled. In Monolithic, everything is tightly coupled together. If you change one thing, 1,000 other things could fall apart because of that. In a service-orientated architecture, which may or may not be made up of microservice, a bunch of microservices, what you try to do is keep things loosely coupled.
Right.
And every service endpoint, as we call it, or every service within that architecture, is orientated, service oriented, is oriented to do one thing and one thing only. And it will be generally that wonderful word, idempotent. In other words, when you tell it to do something, it'll do it the same thing, same way over and over and over again. Okay. Right. And you never expect that to change. So if I have a database over here in my monolithic application, I would say, there is the ODBC connection, right? Go straight to that. Do not pass go. Go straight to that and use that to directly insert data into your database, right? So you're going to do insert X into field Y. That's what you're going to do, right? Or maybe you'll use an ORM or something, but you're going to work directly with the database.
Right.
In a service-oriented architecture, I will say, no, I have an API there. And you will never write directly to the database, because this service takes care of the database.
Right.
So you say, I want to know what is Alan's Twitter handle. So you'll say, Alan Twitter handle, and it'll send you back databytes AI. Or you'll say, okay, I want to update Alan's Twitter handle because he got banned for running a robot, and it used to be databytes with a Z, and now it's AI, right? Yeah, I did. And so in any case, we do that. But if I want to go and I want to maybe add an invoice, I can't go directly to the database underneath the hood. I've got to go to a different service, which is the one that deals with the financial aspect of my company. Right. This is where we isolate out the different service. That's service-orientated, but a service-orientated architecture may or may not be microservices supported or driven or architected or constructed under the hood as well. It may be sensibly architected, or it may be a group of completely different systems. You may even say, well, one part of the service doesn't even have a REST API. Maybe part of the service-orientated architecture is that if you want to send data into the system, you got to drop a message into Kafka, or you got to go and send an email. It doesn't really matter what the end point is that consumes the message or the instruction, so long as it does a service and it does only that one service that it tells you that it will do.
Yeah, it's
so I hope that helps.
Yeah, it's one thing I've been preaching about, whether it's speaking or teaching at a university, things like that, is you want to be disconnected, as much as you can, right? Because of exactly what you've been talking about, right? And so, I've been trying to do that. Of course, 20 years ago, it was harder to do that, but now with, Azure or AWS, it's easier in Azure if you ask me, but you can do it in both, right? And those systems are really allowing us to finally really do the not tightly coupled apps that we've been trying to do for a long time, right? And what Alan's been saying about, disconnecting the messages from going into the database and everything was exactly what I did at this project, where I got it down to 300 milliseconds, right? And that's really the way you want to go, because, if you stick messages, this is just my 2 cents, but if you stick messages in a queue and for some reason it doesn't go into the database, it'll be picked up again, right, in a couple minutes, right? So it's a more durable way of passing data in and out of a database by doing things like that, right? And so, we're over time, so I'm really sad we couldn't get to the last question, but I want to have you back on. I think everybody's liked this show. And before we go, what do you like to do for fun besides drink beer?
Yeah. Well, number one, I play music very badly. Okay, that's number one, right? Number two, you can probably see behind me there. I'm in my workshop right now. I fix and I build things with wood. So right now,
cool.
the big no, it's on this side. The big tall thing that you see there, that's the side of a boat that I'm building right now. So it's.
I thought it was a 3D printer.
No, the 3D printer is just. Hang on. There. That's the 3D printer.
Yeah.
There. Yeah. But over here, this guy.
Over there.
Tall guy.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
That's the side of a boat. So this weekend is build and float the boat weekend. So I do I work at wood, be it easy DIY construction. I built a bed 2 weeks ago just for the fun. I needed one, so I built a new one. I wasn't going to pay stupid money down the shop. I build historic musical instruments from the 16th century for the fun.
Wow.
and now I'm building a boat. So yeah. So
that sounds like fun.
It's the same as my day job, Dave. I build stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're builders, right? I've been wanting to get a 3D printer, and I just was researching. I've been trying. For me to buy something, I need to have a reason, right? I just don't buy things to buy things, right? And so I've been trying to come up with reasons. I do have a couple, but I discovered last week can actually make guitar picks in the 3D printer, and I'm going, I want to make custom dotNetDave guitar picks, for giving out at conferences and stuff. Like in the shape of my face or something, I don't know. But so anyway, we got to go. Simon's going to get mad at us. So I'm really glad you're on the show. And I just want to make sure that you always have an open invitation to come back on the show whenever you want to talk about something. Don't wait for me to ask you. Just ask me, and I'll stick you in the first slot that I have, which won't be too hard.
Okay, guys, take care. Lovely talking to you. Chat soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Alan.
And wear your mask.
Wear your dang mask. Sorry, almost cussed. Sorry, Simon. That was fun. I really enjoyed that talk with Alan. He's a great guy, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions that you gave, but we'll try to do that next time. Also, before my shows, I always tweet. I always tweet and ask you for questions before the show, so we can have them all lined up, and the guests can maybe go over them before. So if you see that tweet during the week, it's usually like on Wednesday. Tweet me your questions then, and I'll get them worked into the show. It's a little bit easier to do it that way. Okay, let's go back to the slides. I think we just have one more left. Or two more slides left, and we're out of here. So don't forget, on April 20th, 21st is a free Azure Cosmos DB conference. So go there to register for it. And if you haven't used Cosmos DB or a document-based database, you have to come to this conference because this is where data is going in the future. It's already happening, but I think, the more we go in this tech world, the more and more we're going to be using these kind of databases and moving, I think, away from relational databases. And I don't know if Alan agrees with that, but that's kind of what I'm seeing or predicting. So go to that. Thanks for watching. I'm glad everybody made it out today. There's no show next week, but the week after is I'm really looking forward to this show because I'm going to have the infamous Carl Franklin on the show. And you all probably know him from the .NET Rock Show, which is the most popular podcast for .NET out there. And he interviewed me once for his show that turned out to be a really big show for them. And also him and I, we'll talk about this, but him and I actually used to pack the top of the Marriott bar in downtown San Francisco every year because I put on a party right before the VBITS conference, and him and I would play guitar together up there and entertain the crowd the night before the show. So I always fondly remember those days and wish I could do that more often with him for sure. So please, 2 weeks from now, we'll have Carl Franklin. Please be safe. Listen to your medical professionals about COVID-19. I know things are not going in the right direction in most countries, including this one. So please get your vaccines. Please get, please be safe. Wear your mask, as we talked about at the beginning of the show. And if you have, an hour to kill, or if you want to help your fellow human being, please, please, please donate to your local blood bank. All the blood banks, at least in my area, or have a shortage, and they really need your help, especially during a pandemic like this. So that's it for this week. Please email me at Rockin The Code World at CSharpCorner.com. I checked it right before the show. No one sent me an email yet. So come on, someone just send me an email going, hey, Dave, here's an email. And nobody from C-SharpCorner. I know what you're going to do, Simon. All right. I'll see you in 2 weeks on Rockin The Code World, dotNetDave.